Mary had finally had enough. She couldn't take Greg's physical and emotional abuse any longer. But now, with a baby growing inside her, she knew she had to make a change. She couldn't bring a child into that kind of toxic environment. So she packed her bags and left in the middle of the night, leaving behind the life she had known for the past 2 years. She drove for hours until she reached a small town nestled in the mountains. It was quiet and peaceful, a far cry from the chaos she had left behind. Mary found a small cottage for rent and settled in, determined to start a new life for herself and her baby. As she sat on the porch, enjoying the fresh mountain air, she couldn't help but feel a sense of relief wash over her. She had made the right decision. But her peace was short-lived as she soon realized that she was not alone in the cottage. Mary had always been close to her brother, Fred. He was her confidant, her protector, and the only one she could truly trust. So when she needed to escape from her controlling husband, Greg, she turned to Fred for help. For weeks, they had been communicating secretly, planning her escape and deciding on a safe hiding spot. But somehow, Greg had found out her whereabouts. Mary was shocked when she saw him standing in front of her hideout, anger etched on his face. Greg had always been obsessed with his reputation, and he couldn't let Mary ruin it by leaving him. He called her family, who were clueless about her whereabouts, and demanded she come back with him. But Mary refused. She knew that with Greg, she would never be truly free. And as she stood her ground, she realized that maybe her brother wasn't the only one she could trust. Maybe, just maybe, she could count on herself to break free from the chains of her toxic marriage. Apart from Fred, the rest of her family could not believe that Greg was mean to her and tortured her. They thought he was the perfect man for their little girl without knowing the suffering she endured when they were together. They were clueless, and thus they managed to convince her to go back with him. When they got back, everything was okay for just a few days before Greg grew wild again. He hit her hard. Mary had now become so helpless. One evening, as Mary sat alone in her quiet house, she couldn't help but feel a sense of exhaustion wash over her. The day had been long and tiring, and now the thought of cooking dinner for Greg seemed like an impossible task. She closed her eyes and let out a deep sigh, hoping to find some strength to get up and start cooking. But as she opened her eyes, she felt a wave of dizziness hit her. Her head was spinning and she could barely stand up. Realizing that she needed to rest for a bit, Mary decided to lie down on the sofa for just a few minutes. However, those few minutes turned into an hour, and before she knew it, Greg walked through the door. He found Mary lying on the sofa, looking pale and weak. Without a second thought, he snapped at her, demanding to know where his dinner was. Mary tried to explain that she wasn't feeling well, but Greg's anger only grew. He accused her of being lazy and incapable of even the simplest tasks. And in a fit of rage, he raised his hand and struck her across the face. Tears welled up in Mary's eyes as she tried to understand what had just happened. She couldn't believe that her loving husband had become so cold and cruel in an instant. But as she sat there, feeling the stinging pain on her cheek, she realized that this was not the first time. It had become a pattern in their relationship. Her efforts were never enough, and her mistakes were always met with anger and violence. Mary cried and found it hard to breathe. Greg thought she was pretending, and therefore he hit her even harder on the stomach. Mary writhed on the floor, holding her stomach bitterly with tears streaming down her cheeks. She could not find the voice to scream. The pain was unbearable. Greg sat in the waiting room of the hospital, his hands trembling as he waited for news about Mary. He couldn't believe what had just happened. He had been so caught up in his own anger and frustration that he didn't even realize what he had done until it was too late. It had all started with a simple argument, but it quickly escalated into a full-blown fight. In a fit of rage, Greg had pushed Mary against the wall, not stopping until she stopped moving and crying. It was only then that he realized the severity of his actions. Panicked, he carried her to the hospital, his heart pounding with guilt and fear. As he paced back and forth, waiting for the doctor to come out, he couldn't help but wonder why Mary hadn't told him she was pregnant. Finally, the doctor emerged from the examination room, his face grave. "I'm sorry, Mr. Gregg," he said, "but your wife has suffered a miscarriage." Greg's face suddenly changed, his heart sinking to the pit of his stomach. He had no idea that Mary was pregnant. It hit him hard, the realization that he had killed his own child. Tears streamed down his face as he mourned for the life that could have been. But then, in the midst of his grief, anger rose within him once again. Why hadn't Mary told him? Why had she kept something so important from him? He shifted the blame to her, unable to accept his own responsibility in the tragedy. As he sat in the hospital waiting room, surrounded by the sounds of crying babies and families rejoicing, Greg couldn't help but feel a sense of emptiness. He had lost his child. Mary sat in the doctor's office, her eyes fixed on the ultrasound screen, hoping to hear the sound of her baby's heartbeat. But instead, she heard the words that shattered her heart into a million pieces. "I'm sorry, Mary. There's no heartbeat." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process the news. She was completely broken. Her dreams of starting a family with her loving husband, Greg, were now shattered. She didn't know what to do or where to go. But Greg was there, holding her hand and whispering words of comfort. He took her home and cared for her like a loving and devoted husband would. As Mary lay in bed, she couldn't help but wonder if their marriage could remain as strong and loving even after this tragedy. To her surprise, Greg seemed to be struggling just as much as she was. He had regrets and seemed to be learning from his mistakes. It was clear that he loved her deeply and was doing everything he could to make things right. As Mary's body slowly healed, so did their relationship. They talked, cried, and held each other through the pain. And in the midst of their grief, they found a deeper love and appreciation for each other. Mary knew that their marriage would never be the same. It wasn't until one day, out of the blue, that Anna showed up at Mary's doorstep. They had been best friends in medical school, but life had taken them on different paths. Anna had become a successful doctor, while Mary had chosen to be a stay-at-home mom. Anna was accompanied by her husband, John, a handsome and charismatic man. Mary was excited to see her old friend and invited them in for some tea. The moment Greg, Mary's husband, walked through the door, his appearance changed completely at the sight of another man in his house. Mary went ahead to welcome him home, but then she was greeted with a loud slap across the face. Stunned and confused, Mary could only watch as her husband accused her of cheating on him with John. Before she could even respond, John was on the receiving end of Greg's wrath. He tried to explain that they were just old friends catching up, but Greg wouldn't listen. He continued to beat John, while Mary stood frozen in shock. Just when it seemed like things were getting out of control, Anna emerged from the washroom. She immediately realized what was going on and stood up to Greg, demanding that he stop. As it turned out, John and Anna had been planning a surprise visit to Mary for weeks. They had no idea that Mary's husband was abusive and controlling. Anna's presence not only saved John from a brutal beating, but it also opened Mary's eyes to the truth about her marriage. A few moments later, Anna and John left, leaving Mary and her husband alone. They had experienced something really bad. Anna felt bad that her good friend fell into the hands of such a monster. She took her husband John to the hospital for a checkup to make sure that he was perfectly fine before they went back to their home. To justify his actions, Greg accused Mary of bringing guests into their home without informing him. Mary sat on her bed, her mind racing with thoughts of what had just transpired. Her friend had caught a glimpse of her husband's abusive behavior and she was worried about what she would say. But as she sat there, the realization hit her like a ton of bricks. She needed to worry about her own sanity. For too long, she had been trapped in a cycle of confiding in her family and friends about her desire to leave her marriage, only to be convinced to stay each time. But not this time. This time, she would act without talking to anyone. She realized that sometimes, the best decisions are the ones made in silence, without the influence of others. Mary had always dreamed of starting a new life in a foreign land, far away from the troubles and memories of her past. She had carefully planned her escape, knowing that she needed to disappear completely if she wanted to be truly free. And on that fateful morning, as the sun rose and Greg left for work, Mary's heart raced with excitement and fear. A taxi pulled up outside her small apartment, and Mary quickly loaded her bags into the back seat. She couldn't believe it was finally happening. She was leaving everything behind and starting over. As the taxi drove towards the airport, Mary could feel the weight of her old life slowly lifting off her shoulders. But just as she was about to board the plane, a familiar face appeared in the crowd. It was Greg, his eyes filled with anger and betrayal. Mary's heart sank as she realized that he had somehow found out about her plan. Without a second thought, Mary grabbed her bags and ran towards the nearest exit. She couldn't let Greg stop her from leaving. As she ran through the bustling airport, Mary's determination only grew stronger. She had come too far to give up now. With a last burst of energy, Mary made it to the departure gate and boarded the plane. As the aircraft took off, leaving the country and all its troubles behind, Mary felt a sense of relief wash over her. She had finally broken free and was ready to start a new chapter in her life. As the plane flew towards her new destination, Mary couldn't help but smile. She knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she was strong enough to overcome them. And with a fresh start in a new country, she was ready to take on the world. Mary had always been a free spirit, ready to embrace change and explore new possibilities. So, when she moved to Seychelles, she didn't have any trouble settling in and adapting to the new environment and culture. It felt like a breath of fresh air, as the laid-back lifestyle of the island was not much different from the norms back in Green City. As she explored her new neighborhood, Mary found herself making new friends who welcomed her with open arms. She was amazed by how easy it was to blend in and become a part of the community. And soon, she decided to take things a step further by changing her identity, just for the fun of it. With her new identity, Mary started getting along with everything in her new home. She embraced the local customs and traditions, and even learned a few phrases in the native language. The people of Seychelles were warm and welcoming, and Mary felt like she belonged. But amidst the excitement of her new life, Mary never forgot her passion for medicine. She had always dreamed of opening her own pharmacy and helping people in need. And now, with the support of her new friends and community, she finally made her dream a reality. Her pharmacy quickly became the go-to place for anyone in need of medical assistance. Mary's warm smile and caring nature made her patients feel at ease, and they trusted her with their health. She was not just a pharmacist, but also a friend and confidant to many. As Mary looked around her, she couldn't believe how far she had come in such a short time. She had found a new home, new friends, and a new purpose in life. And she knew that she would never look back, for she had found her true calling in the beautiful island of Seychelles. Mary sat on the edge of her bed, her hands resting on her swollen belly. 2 months down the line and she had just realized that she was pregnant. It explained her sudden mood swings and her insatiable appetite. But the news hit her hard. She had left her abusive marriage, and now here comes something that will constantly remind her of her ex-husband. She was confused and didn't know what to do. Her first thought was to do away with the baby. After all, it was a product of a toxic relationship. But then she looked down at her belly and saw a tiny hand pressing against her skin. She couldn't do it. It was then that she realized she was no longer a little girl. She had another life inside of her, depending on her. And that made her determination to work harder grow bigger. She wanted to give her baby a better life, one free of violence and fear. As the months went by, Mary's belly grew bigger and her determination grew stronger. She was determined to provide for her child and to be the best mother she could be. As her due date drew near, Mary couldn't help but feel a little nervous. She was a single mother-to-be, with no family nearby to support her. But she was lucky to have her friendly neighbors, who always looked after her. One day, as she was struggling to carry a load of groceries, an old man appeared out of nowhere and offered to help. His name was Mr. Jenkins and he had lived in the neighborhood for decades. Mary was touched by his kindness and from that day on, he became her go-to person for any help she needed. As her belly grew bigger, Mr. Jenkins would often stop by to check on her, bringing homemade treats and sharing stories of his own children. He even taught her how to knit a baby blanket. As the day of her delivery arrived, Mary went into labor in the middle of the night. She called Mr. Jenkins, who rushed her to the hospital and stayed by her side until her beautiful baby girl was born. From that day on, Mr. Jenkins became an honorary grandfather to Mary's daughter. Mary had always dreamed of owning her own pharmacy. She was passionate about helping people and had a natural knack for business. When she found out she was pregnant, she knew it would be a challenge to balance caring for a newborn and running her growing pharmacy. So, she hired a young woman named Lily to help her out. Lily was a recent graduate with a degree in pharmacy and was eager to learn from Mary. Together, they managed to keep the pharmacy running smoothly while Mary took a few months off to take care of her baby. But Mary's pharmacy had become so popular that they were struggling to keep up with the demand. Customers were constantly asking when she would open another branch. As she nursed her baby, Mary began to think about expanding her business. She had always been a planner and knew that she could make it work. With Lily's help, they created a detailed plan and Mary started scouting out potential locations for new branches. Even though it was challenging juggling motherhood and running a business, Mary was determined to make her dream a reality. And with Lily's help, she did just that. A year later, Mary's pharmacy had not one, but 3 branches in different parts of the city. Her reputation for providing quality products and excellent customer service had spread far and wide. And as she watched her baby sleeping peacefully in her arms, Mary couldn't help but feel grateful for the help and support she had received along the way. As she looked into the future, Mary knew that it would be a balancing act, but she was ready for the challenge. With her baby by her side and Lily by her side, Mary's pharmacy was on its way to becoming a household name. And she couldn't wait to see what other opportunities lay ahead. Mary had always dreamed of making a name for herself in the pharmaceutical industry. With Net Farm Company Limited, she finally achieved that. But as her business grew and her fame spread, she caught the attention of other big companies. They wanted to collaborate with her, and she couldn't say no to such opportunities. To her surprise, these collaborations brought even more success. Mary's brand became the top choice for consumers, even surpassing long-existing companies. She was now a center of attraction in the industry, with everyone wanting to work with her. But the collaborations also opened her eyes to something greater. With her newfound fame and connections, Mary realized that she could do more. She set her sights on becoming the top distributor of pharmaceuticals in the country. With determination and hard work, Mary achieved her goal. She became a household name, and her business flourished. People admired her for her success and looked up to her as a role model. And Mary knew that she had found her true calling in the world of pharmaceuticals, back in Green City. Greg got into so much trouble following the disappearance of Mary, his wife. Her family used all the connections they had and their resources, but they could not find her. The whole family was in distress, with Fred constantly reminding them that when Mary was going through hell, they never listened to her or believed what she said. Her father had the greatest regrets. If only he listened to his little girl, she would not have disappeared. It took him a few moments to realize that Mary, the love of his life, was not by his side. Panic set in as he frantically searched the house, but she was nowhere to be found. It was then that Greg realized he was in love with Mary, and her disappearance caused him immense pain. He blamed his own character for pushing her away, but he had no way of controlling it. As days turned into weeks, Greg's life fell apart. His once successful career was now in ruins, with his work suffering and his colleagues avoiding him like the plague. His drinking got out of hand as he drowned his sorrows in alcohol. Mark had always been the one person Greg could count on. As his assistant, he had worked closely with Greg for years, and their bond was unbreakable. But as he watched his boss suffer in silence, Mark felt helpless. Greg had always been a tough and driven man, but the loss of his love, Mary, had taken a toll on him like never before. Mark knew that Greg's strong personality had driven Mary away, but he never thought it would lead to this. Mark had searched everywhere for Mary, but she was nowhere to be found. He felt sorry for his boss, but he also knew that his own actions had played a part in driving Mary away. As he watched Greg struggle to keep it together, Mark couldn't help but feel guilty. He had always been there for his boss, but this time, he couldn't fix things. Mark had always been the backbone of the company, working tirelessly to keep it afloat. But when their boss started neglecting his responsibilities and spending most of his time at the bar, things started falling apart. Investors began to pull out, and the company was on the verge of collapse. Mark, determined to save the company, took matters into his own hands. He organized a meeting with all the investors and presented a new business plan, showcasing his innovative ideas and strategies. With his charismatic personality and convincing arguments, he managed to win back their trust and support. With renewed faith and financial backing, Mark led the company to new heights, proving that sometimes it takes a dedicated individual to keep a sinking ship afloat. Greg struggled to stay sane as Mark helped him with the company matters. Greg needed to get himself back together and move on with life. As Greg sat in his office, staring at the pile of paperwork in front of him. He couldn't concentrate, his mind was consumed with thoughts of her. Mark, his assistant, noticed his distraction and offered to help with the company matters. Greg accepted, grateful for the distraction. As they worked, Mark could sense that something was weighing heavily on Greg's mind. Finally, Greg opened up about his recent struggles and how it had affected him. Mark listened patiently and then offered some words of wisdom. "You have to let her go, Greg. You messed up and you can't change that. But you can learn from it and move on." As the words sunk in, Greg felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He realized that he couldn't let his personal life interfere with his business. With Mark's help, he was able to get back on track and focus on the future. And as for her, well, he had to accept that she was no longer a part of it. Greg had always been a hard worker, but after his breakup with Mary, his productivity had taken a sharp decline. His mind was constantly consumed by thoughts of her, making it difficult for him to focus on anything else. But one day, something changed. Greg woke up with a newfound determination to leave his past behind and focus on his work. He shut off his phone, closed his social media accounts, and dove headfirst into his projects. With each completed task, Greg felt a weight being lifted off his shoulders. Greg had spent years searching for inner peace, but it always seemed just out of reach. He tried everything from meditation to therapy, but nothing seemed to work. Then one day, something clicked within him and he finally found the peace he had been longing for. He moved on with his life, grateful for the newfound tranquility that allowed him to fully appreciate every moment. He let go of past grudges and embraced the present with open arms. But just when he thought he had it all figured out, a clue about Mary's whereabouts surfaced. Mary, his long-lost love, who had disappeared without a trace. Suddenly, Greg's peaceful life was thrown into turmoil as he embarked on a journey to find her. Greg's heart raced as he flipped through the glossy pages of the magazine his associate had handed him. There she was, Mary, the woman he had once loved and lost. But now, she was a rising star in the pharmaceuticals industry, gracing the cover of the magazine with her radiant smile. His associate asked if he had helped her build her brand, and Greg couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. He had always believed in Mary's talent and had helped her in any way he could. But as he looked at her picture, he realized that she was the one he had been waiting for all these years. He quickly checked the details of where she was residing, Seychelles. Without hesitation, Greg booked a ticket and headed straight to the island paradise. As he stepped off the plane, he could feel his heart beating faster with each passing moment. He couldn't wait to see her, to finally have her back in his life. But as he made his way to her house, he couldn't help but wonder, would she still feel the same way about him? Would she be happy to see him? Or had she moved on? That same day, Mary felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as she boarded a plane back to Green City. She was accompanied by her dear friend Lily and Lily's daughter Becky, who were both equally thrilled for the trip. Mary had been invited to the launching of the newest branch of Addix Pharmaceuticals, one of the leading companies in the city. As they settled into their seats, Mary couldn't help but think about the unexpected turn her life had taken. Who would have thought that a young lady from Green City would be the owner of Netpharm, a successful pharmaceutical company? As they chatted about the upcoming event, Mary's mind was buzzing with ideas and questions. Upon their arrival, they were greeted by the grandeur of the Addix building. Mary couldn't help but feel a sense of pride and admiration for the city she called home. She was even more amazed when she found out that the owner of Addix was none other than her childhood friend, Alex. As they made their way to the event, Mary was filled with excitement to learn more about Addix and its success. She couldn't wait to share her insights and ideas with fellow investors in the industry. Little did she know, this trip would turn out to be a life-changing experience. The event was a huge success, and Mary was impressed by the innovative ideas and advancements presented by addicts. As she mingled with other investors, she couldn't help but feel grateful for the opportunity to be a part of such an incredible industry. As the night came to an end, she realized that sometimes, the greatest successes come from unexpected places, and she was grateful to have been a part of Alex's journey. As they said their goodbyes and headed back to their hotel, Mary couldn't stop smiling. She knew that this trip would be a memory she would cherish forever. She had made a number of connections which would be a great help in the future. Greg stepped out of the taxi and gazed around Mary's new town. It was a bustling metropolis with towering skyscrapers and flashy cars. As he walked towards Mary's property, he couldn't help but feel envious of her success. It seemed like she had it all: wealth, status, and a luxurious home. But when he arrived at her mansion, he was met with disappointment. Mary was not there. Instead, the caretaker informed him that she was attending an event at Green City. Greg's heart sank. He had traveled all this way to see her, only to find out she was out of the country. Determined to wait for her, Greg booked a hotel room nearby. He couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. Mary woke up to the sound of her phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. She groggily reached for it, wondering who could be calling her at such an early hour. As she scrolled through her notifications, her heart skipped a beat. A series of missed calls and a text from her caretaker, accompanied by a few pictures. Pictures of Greg, her ex-husband, standing outside her door. How did he find her? She had moved to Green City to escape him and start a new life. But it seemed he was determined to follow her. The text read, "Waiting for you, Mary. I won't leave until you come back." And just like that, Mary's stay in Green City was prolonged, as she couldn't bear to face Greg again. It was a bright and sunny day, and Mary sat on her balcony, admiring the view of the bustling city below. As she sipped her coffee, she couldn't help but think about her family. It had been years since she last saw them, and the guilt of not keeping in touch weighed heavily on her. But today, something inside her shifted. She felt the urge to reconnect with her loved ones. Without a second thought, Mary called her favorite brother, Fred. As soon as he heard her voice, he was taken aback. They hadn't spoken in so long. But before he could utter a word, Mary blurted out her plan of visiting their family. Fred was overjoyed and promised to arrange everything. As Mary's flight landed, she couldn't contain her excitement. She was finally going to see her family after so many years. As she walked towards their house, she couldn't help but feel nervous. She wasn't sure how they would react after all this time. But as soon as they opened the door, all her fears vanished. They welcomed her with open arms, and she knew that no matter what, they would always be her family. Over the next few days, Mary caught up with her parents, her siblings, and even her cousins. They laughed, reminisced about old memories, and created new ones. When Mary was having fun with her brothers, her mother found a new sweetheart, Becky, Mary's daughter. The bond between them was inseparable. They had just met and fallen for each other. Greg had been waiting for Mary's return for days, checking the clock every few minutes with growing impatience. His business needed his attention, but his heart needed the relief of her presence. He asked the caretaker again, but the answer was still uncertain. As he paced around the room, his eyes fell on a portrait on the wall. It was Mary, holding a little girl who looked just like a mix of them both. A surge of emotions hit him like a tidal wave, excitement mixed with rage. How could she elope with his blood? Greg was desperate to find Mary. Ever since the miscarriage, she had disappeared without a trace. But now, a baby had appeared out of nowhere, and Greg couldn't help but wonder, was it hers? He immediately arranged for his men back home to follow up on her whereabouts. He knew he had to confront Mary, to find out the truth. So, he booked a night flight back to Green City. As the plane took off, Greg's mind raced with all the possible scenarios. Was she hiding the pregnancy from him? Did she have an affair? Or was the baby a symbol of hope, a second chance for their shattered relationship? Greg sat nervously on the plane, unsure of what awaited him back in Green City. He had left his men behind and drove alone to Mary's home, hoping to make things right. But as he approached her house, a sense of dread washed over him. He knew he had hurt her deeply and there was no way to fix it. When he arrived, the atmosphere shifted. Everyone was having a good time, but as soon as Greg's presence was announced, a guard stepped in and barred him from entering. He had been instructed not to let Greg in under any circumstances. Greg hung his head in shame, knowing he deserved this punishment. He had caused Mary so much pain, and no one believed him when he said he had changed. But as he stood there, he noticed something strange. Mary's family seemed to be on edge, whispering among themselves. Finally, Mary arrived and explained to her family the kind of person Greg was. She revealed how he was good at faking issues and manipulating those around him. Her family's eyes widened in shock and they felt sorry for her. Together, they vowed to support Mary's decisions onwards. It was a miracle that they had gotten her back when they thought they had completely lost her. As for Greg, he knew he had a long road ahead of him to earn back their trust and forgiveness. Greg was a master at pulling stunts, especially when it came to his relationship with Mary. But this time, things had gone too far. As he stood outside their gate, shouting for Mary to come out, he knew he didn't have the strength to leave. He was determined to make her cave in, to see his child at least. But Mary wasn't one to fall for his tricks anymore. The rain started pouring heavily, drenching Greg's clothes and hair, but he remained steadfast. However, his legs gave out and he fell to the ground, defeated. The onlookers gaped in shock, wondering what had happened to the once confident and charming Greg. But Mary just stood there, a hint of sadness in her eyes. As she closed the door behind her, leaving Greg in the rain, she knew it was the right decision for her and their child. The rain poured down in relentless sheets, drenching the city streets. Onlookers huddled under awnings, watching the lone figure standing in the middle of the downpour. He seemed oblivious to the cold and wet, lost in thought. Some whispered about his mental state, others cursed his lover Mary for leaving him out in the storm. But it was only when the morning came and the man, Greg, woke up with a fever that the truth was revealed. He had refused Mark's offer to take him home because he couldn't face returning to an empty house where Mary should have been waiting. But now, as he headed to the hospital, it was clear that his heartache was more than just emotional. It was a physical illness, brought on by the pain of losing the one he loved. Greg was determined to get Mary back this time, no matter what it took. After hours of pleading and apologizing, he was taken to the hospital where he was receiving treatment for his mental instability. But when he heard that she had left the country that very night, his mind snapped. He ripped out the foredrip and threw it across the room, screaming incoherently. The nurses rushed in, trying to calm him down, but he was beyond reason. He escaped from the hospital, determined to catch Mary before she left. As he ran through the pouring rain, his mind replayed memories of their time together. He refused to let her go, not this time. But when he finally arrived at the airport, he was too late. Mary's plane had already taken off. Greg collapsed to his knees, the rain mixing with his tears. But he couldn't bring himself to go back to the hospital. He was too broken, too defeated. And so, he wandered the streets, a madman in love. As the plane soared through the clouds, Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She glanced over at her friend and boss, Mary, who seemed lost in thought. "What's wrong?" Lily asked, breaking the silence. Mary sighed, her eyes filled with sadness. "It's just, I don't know if I can forgive him this time." Lily's brow furrowed. "Forgive who?" Mary hesitated before confiding in her friend. "My ex-husband. He's done some unforgivable things. The miscarriages, the beatings, I just can't take it anymore." Lily's heart ached for her friend. She knew how much Mary had been through in the past, but she never realized just how bad things had gotten. "I'm so sorry, Mary," Lily said, placing a comforting hand on her friend's shoulder. Mary shook her head, tears in her eyes. "The worst part is, he always got away with it. In front of my family, my friends, no one ever believed me." Lily's empathy for Mary turned to anger towards her ex-husband. How could he do such horrible things to someone he claimed to love? Suddenly, an idea sparked in Lily's mind. "You know what? Let's forget about him. You deserve someone who treats you with love and respect." Someone who will never lay a hand on you. Mary looked up at Lily, hope flickering in her eyes. Do you really think I can find someone like that? Lily nodded firmly. I know you can. You are young, beautiful, and talented. Greg, her ex-husband, had been searching for her everywhere. He had all the information he needed to find her here. She couldn't risk being found by him again, not after what he had done to her. Mary booked a 1-week accommodation on the neighboring island of Praslin, planning to relocate for good. She needed a peaceful place to rebuild her life and continue her businesses without fear and disturbances. Mary had started a new life away from the prying eyes of society. She had left behind her past, her heartache, and her ex-husband Greg. She had built a successful career, but deep down, she still felt the sting of betrayal. She had loved Greg with all her heart, but he had shattered her dreams and left her broken. She often thought of ways to seek revenge on him, but nothing seemed to be the perfect solution. Until one day, Michael walked into her life. He was a tall, handsome man with a heart of gold. He was hardworking and caring, and he made her daughter, Becky, laugh like she had never laughed before. Mary was cautious at first, afraid of getting hurt again. But as she got to know Michael, she realized that he was everything she had ever wanted. He showed her what true love was and helped her heal from the wounds of the past. Becky sat on Michael's lap, giggling as he tickled her. They had always been inseparable, with a bond that seemed unbreakable. But to those who didn't know her past, it was as if Michael was her father. They couldn't understand how a man like him could love a woman with another man's child. Mary, Becky's mother, was envious of their relationship, but she was also grateful. Grateful that someone could love her and her daughter unconditionally. Michael was born into a wealthy family, with expectations to take over his father's company. But he strayed from the path his parents had set for him, choosing to follow his own happiness instead. This was not the case for Terry, who had loved Michael for years. Their families had arranged their marriage, and Terry saw it as an opportunity to finally be with the man she loved. But Michael's rejection of their engagement broke her heart. As Becky played with Michael's tie, Mary couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. She knew that Michael's love for her daughter was the reason for Terry's heartache. But she was also grateful for his love, for the way he had taken Becky under his wing and treated her as his own. She knew that he would never leave them, no matter what. Terry's heart shattered into a million pieces when she saw Michael walking hand in hand with Mary, his new girlfriend. She couldn't believe that he had chosen her over Terry, a woman who had stood by him through thick and thin. The worst part was that Mary had a child from a previous relationship. Terry was bitter and angry, feeling betrayed and rejected. She had rejected every other suitor, believing that Michael would come back to her. But as she watched him laugh and smile with Mary, she knew it was time to let go. However, something inside her snapped and she made a vow to win him back at any cost. She started scheming and manipulating, planting seeds of doubt in Michael's mind about Mary. And Mary had always been a protective and devoted mother to her daughter, Becky. She would drop her off at kindergarten every morning, and pick her up promptly in the afternoon. But one day, as she arrived to pick up Becky, the teacher informed her that her daughter had been kidnapped. Panic and fear gripped Mary's heart as she frantically searched the school and the surrounding area. She called Michael, who was a powerful businessman, to inform him of the situation. To her surprise, Michael was already aware and had mobilized his men to search for Becky. Mary was relieved that Michael was taking it seriously, but she couldn't understand why he seemed so calm. As the hours passed and the search yielded no results, Mary's worry turned into anger towards Michael. How could he be so calm when their daughter was missing? But then, the phone rang. It was Terry, Michael's ex-girlfriend, who had always been jealous of Mary and their happy family. She had kidnapped Becky and demanded that Michael marry her in exchange for their daughter's safety. Michael was torn. He didn't want to marry Terry, but he couldn't risk Becky's life. Mary, on the other hand, was determined to find her daughter and bring her back home. With the help of their friends and the police, they came up with a plan to rescue Becky and bring Terry to justice. It was a race against time, but they were willing to do whatever it took to save their daughter. Michael's heart raced as he approached the abandoned warehouse. He had never been more terrified in his life. His men had tracked down Terry's location and he knew he had to act fast before she did something irreversible. As he entered the dark building, he saw Terry standing in the center, holding a knife to Becky's throat. His heart sank as he saw the tears streaming down her cheeks. "Terry, this has nothing to do with an innocent child," Michael said, trying to reason with her. "Just let her go and deal with me." Terry laughed sarcastically. "Oh, but she has everything to do with this," she spat. "She's the reason you've turned your back on me, the reason you no longer have any warmth for me." Michael's heart broke as he saw the pain and desperation in Terry's eyes. He knew he had to handle this delicately. "Listen, Terry," he said, taking a step closer. "I know you're hurting, but this is not the way to deal with it. Let's talk things out, just the two of us." Terry's expression softened for a moment, but then she shook her head. "No, it's too late for that. You have chosen her over me, and now I will make sure you pay for it." With that, she tightened her grip on the knife and pressed it closer to Becky's throat. Michael's heart raced as he tried to come up with a plan. Suddenly, there was a loud crash and the three men surrounding Terry fell to the ground, unconscious. Michael's men had arrived just in time. Mary, who had come with them, rushed forward towards Becky. She pleaded with Terry to let her go, crying uncontrollably, but this angered Terry even more. Terry's eyes widened in shock as she saw Michael's men surrounding her. "How did you?" she started to say, but then she saw Michael standing in front of her, alone. "You think I would come here without backup?" Michael said with a smirk. "Now, let Becky go, and let's talk this out." Terry hesitated, her grip on the knife tightening. She had been hired to take down Michael, the notorious leader of the underworld. But as she looked at him now, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of doubt. He seemed different, almost human. But then she saw the concern in his eyes towards Becky and the way he lovingly looked at Mary, the little girl's mother. Anger and jealousy flared up inside of her. She tightened the grip on the knife and scratched Becky's neck in the process. Michael's face contorted in pain and he took a step back, his eyes never leaving Terry's. "You've made your choice," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Terry's heart sank as she realized what she had done. She had fallen for Michael's trick, letting her guard down for just a moment. But it was enough for him to see the good in her, to see that she was capable of love and compassion. In that moment, Terry made a decision. She dropped the knife and stepped away, freeing Becky from her grasp. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Just don't make the same mistake twice," he said, before turning and walking away, leaving Terry to face the consequences of her actions. Terry looked at Becky, guilt weighing heavily on her heart. She knew she could never undo what she had done, but she could try to make amends. And as she hugged the little girl tightly, she knew that Michael had changed her in ways she never thought possible. Michael immediately called the police and handed Terry over to them. As Terry was taken away, Michael couldn't help but feel responsible for the harm and trauma Becky had experienced. He knew he had to do something to protect her. But as he reflected on the events that had unfolded, he couldn't understand how Terry could use a small child to try to win his love. It was clear that she was mentally unstable. Michael made a promise to himself to do everything in his power to keep Becky safe. He would make sure she received the love and care she deserved, and he would also make sure that Terry got the help she needed. As he watched the police car drive away with Terry in the back, Michael knew that he had made the right decision. Mary was so confused, it seemed that she wasn't going to enjoy peace of mind either way. She was always watching out for her ex-husband and now she had made another enemy in love. "I can't keep on running away from my problems," Mary thought to herself. She left her home country when her husband became unbearable. She also relocated when he found her whereabouts, and this time around, Mary thought that she needed to face her problems head-on instead of running away cowardly. Mary walked through the bustling streets of the city, her heart heavy with guilt and regret. She couldn't keep running away from her problems, she knew that now. She had left her home country when her husband's abuse became too much to bear. And when he had finally found her, she had fled again, this time with her daughter Becky by her side. But this time, Mary had made a decision. She couldn't keep living in fear, always on the run. She needed to face her problems head-on, even if it meant confronting her husband. She had to be strong for her daughter and for herself. As she walked, lost in her thoughts, Mary suddenly heard her name being called out. She turned around to see Terry. Mary was surprised to see her here, in this high-end shopping mall. But what surprised her even more was the fact that Terry was out of police custody. Mary's mind raced as she tried to put the pieces together. She remembered the news of Terry's kidnapping, which had left her and Becky traumatized. And now, here she was, walking freely. Terry approached Mary with a smile. Mary knew she could not trust Terry. She had threatened her before and there is no way she could not attempt again. Mary was still wondering how Terry got away from police custody when suddenly, she felt a sharp snap on her face, bringing her back to reality. Terry stood in front of her, a malicious grin on her face. "What are you thinking about, woman?" Terry sneered. "Why don't you just go find the father of your child? Why do you have to come between my love with Michael? If it wasn't for you, we would be getting married by now." Mary's heart raced as she remembered the countless threats Terry had made towards her. She knew she couldn't trust her, but she also couldn't let Terry ruin her life. With a deep breath, Mary stood up and faced Terry. "I won't let you get away with this," she said defiantly. Terry's grin turned into a scowl as she lunged towards Mary. But Mary was ready. She had been training for months, preparing for this exact moment. In one swift motion, Mary dodged Terry's attack and threw her to the ground. The two women wrestled, their screams echoing throughout the mall and attracting other shoppers. The management hurriedly called the police. Just as Mary thought she had the upper hand, Terry reached for a nearby knife. But before she could use it, Michael appeared out of nowhere and grabbed Terry's hand, pulling her away from Mary. She stumbled and glared at him, her anger boiling over. "Why do you always protect this woman?" she shouted, referring to Mary. "What does she have that I don't? We were meant for each other. Can't you see how much I love you?" Terry's tears streamed down her face, her emotions raw and exposed. But Michael remained unfazed, his grip on her hand unyielding. "Cut the crap," he said sternly. "If he loved you, why hasn't he married you all this time? Even before I appeared. Just accept the fact that Michael doesn't love you and move on." Terry's heart shattered into a million pieces at his words. She knew deep down that he was right, but she couldn't bear to admit it. Michael had been her rock, her shoulder to cry on, and now he was crushing her heart with his brutal honesty. Before she could say anything else, Michael scooped Mary up in his arms and carried her away, leaving Terry standing alone on the sidewalk. As she watched them disappear into the distance, Terry's anger turned into bitterness. She couldn't believe that Michael had chosen Mary over her, someone he had known for a fraction of the time they had been together. But just as she was about to turn and walk away, a swarm of police cars pulled up to the curb. Terry's heart dropped as she realized they were coming for her. "What have you done, Terry?" Michael asked, his voice laced with disappointment as the police officers led her away in handcuffs. As she sat in the back of the police car, Terry couldn't help but think about Michael's words. Maybe he was right, she thought. Maybe her character was what had driven him away all this time. And as the police car drove away, Terry made a vow to herself. She would change, she would become a better person. Despite facing many challenges and setbacks, she never gave up on her vision. Her pharmaceutical company, NetPharm, had become a household name and was highly sought after by investors. However, Mary had one fear that held her back, her ex-husband Greg. He had always been unsupportive of her business and had even tried to sabotage it in the past. But Mary was determined to not let him hold her back any longer. She made the bold decision to expand her business to her hometown, Green City. She knew the locals would appreciate her products and she was ready to face her fears and make her business a success there. With a determined spirit, Mary began the process of acquiring everything she needed for the expansion. She also hired a team of dedicated personnel who shared her passion for helping others through medicine. As the news of NetPharm's expansion spread, many investors lined up to collaborate with Mary. The news spread so fast, and when Greg learned about it, he knew his opportunity had come. He would use it to make things right with Mary, and he would also support her business, but he was well aware that Mary wasn't short of money, so he would have to think of another way of getting close to her. Greg's business had also grown immensely, and he had other upcoming companies. He planned to use one of his companies, which is not associated directly, to cooperate with her. Mary Stevens stood in her newly established office in Green City, looking out at the bustling streets below. NetFarm had always been her dream, a beacon of hope and healing she had built from scratch despite countless obstacles. Now, as she prepared to launch the company's expansion into her hometown, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. This was her chance to bring her vision to life in a place she had always cherished, but there was a shadow looming over her success. Her ex-husband, Greg, was a name she had hoped to leave behind when she moved on from their tumultuous past. Greg had always been a thorn in her side, his lack of support and attempts to sabotage her business only fueling her determination. Now, the expansion of NetFarm to Green City seemed to have rekindled his interest. In a high-rise office in the city, Greg watched the news report about NetFarm's expansion with a steely glint in his eye. The success of his own ventures had brought him financial prosperity, but it was clear that there was something more he wanted to achieve. Greg's latest company, Tech, was on the verge of making a breakthrough in an unrelated field, biotechnology. While it didn't directly intersect with NetFarm, it provided him with a perfect guise to re-enter Mary's life. Greg's plan was to use Tech to offer collaboration under the pretense of mutual benefit. He would present himself as a potential partner who could provide advanced research technology that might benefit NetFarm's future projects. This was his way in, a strategic move to mend the broken bridges and perhaps subtly undermine Mary's latest venture. Back in Green City, Mary was busy organizing the grand opening of NetFarm's new facility. The anticipation was palpable. She was receiving messages of support from local communities and investors eager to see the impact NetFarm would make. Her team, a group of passionate and skilled professionals, was equally excited about the potential this new chapter held, but Mary couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that crept up when she saw a familiar name pop up in her inbox, an invitation from Tech. The email suggested a meeting to discuss potential collaboration opportunities. Despite her initial reluctance, Mary decided to attend. She was determined not to let any past fears dictate her decisions, even if they came dressed in new business proposals. The day of the meeting arrived, and Mary walked into Tech's sleek, modern office with a sense of cautious optimism. Greg greeted her with a warm, almost too friendly smile. His demeanor was polished and professional, but Mary's intuition told her to stay alert. "Mary, it's been a long time," Greg said, extending a hand. "I'm glad we could finally catch up." Mary shook his hand, maintaining her composure. "Greg, what can Tech offer NetFarm that we don't already have?" Greg's eyes gleamed as he outlined Tech's latest innovations in biotechnology. "We've developed some promising technology that could complement NetFarm's research and production processes. I believe a partnership could be mutually beneficial." Mary listened carefully, weighing his words. She was well aware of Greg's tendency for manipulation, and while he appeared genuine, she needed to be cautious. As the meeting progressed, Greg's charm and seemingly sincere offers made it difficult to discern his true intentions. But Mary's focus remained on her goal, to ensure NetFarm's success and protect her hard-earned achievements. After the meeting, Mary returned to her office with a heavy heart. She couldn't ignore the possibility that Greg might have ulterior motives, but she also recognized that Tech's technology could potentially be a game-changer for NetFarm. Determined to avoid any pitfalls, Mary decided to conduct her own thorough investigation into Tech's claims and Greg's recent business practices. She enlisted her team to help with due diligence, ensuring every aspect of the proposed partnership was scrutinized. As days turned into weeks, Mary's vigilance paid off. She discovered that while Greg's technology was indeed promising, his interest in collaboration was driven by a more personal agenda: reconciliation. Greg wanted to prove his support, but Mary was not ready to forgive and forget so easily. In the end, Mary chose to move forward with a cautious approach. She accepted some of Tech's technology on a trial basis while maintaining a strict boundary in their business dealings. This way, she could benefit from the advancements without compromising NetFarm's integrity. Mary's decision was not just a victory for her company but also a testament to her resilience. She had faced her fears, navigated through the complexities of her past, and emerged stronger. Netfarm continued to thrive, becoming a symbol of perseverance and innovation in Green City.as. For Greg, while he remained a part of the business landscape, Mary's resolve ensured that his influence over her life and career remained firmly in the past. Her journey had proven that no shadow from the past could dim the light of her success. Mary Stevens looked out at the lush landscape of Green City from her office window, a satisfied smile on her face. Netfarm's expansion was a dream realized, a testament to her hard work and resilience. But beyond the professional success, her personal life was evolving in ways she had once thought were impossible. Her daughter, Terry, had brought a new dimension to her life, filling it with joy and purpose. Mary was determined to provide Terry with the best life possible, to be the mother she had always aspired to be. Her role as a mother had shifted her focus and priorities, making her even more resolute in keeping her past, particularly her ex-husband Greg, firmly behind her. Despite this resolve, the reality of life sometimes required acceptance. Greg's re-emergence in her professional world was a stark reminder that she could not avoid him forever. But Mary was prepared. She would confront this challenge with the same strength and determination that had seen her through countless other obstacles. As she navigated the complexities of her expanded business, Mary found solace and support in a new relationship. Michael, a compassionate and thoughtful man, had entered her life during a time of transition. His genuine care for her and his kindness towards Terry had been a source of immense comfort. Michael's presence was a stark contrast to the tumultuous past she had left behind. Their relationship had blossomed organically. Michael understood Mary's need for a fresh start, and he never pressured her to move faster than she was comfortable with. Instead, he showed unwavering support and patience, becoming a pillar of strength for both Mary and Terry. One evening, as Mary and Michael shared a quiet dinner, Terry played nearby, her laughter filling the room. Mary glanced at Michael, feeling a sense of peace and contentment that had been elusive for so long. "I can't tell you how much I appreciate everything you've done for us," Mary said softly. "Terry loves spending time with you, and that means the world to me." Michael reached across the table, taking her hand gently. "I'm just glad to be part of your lives. You and Terry have brought so much joy into my life." Their relationship, though still new, felt like a beacon of hope, illuminating the path forward. Mary felt a deep connection with Michael, one that offered the promise of a future filled with love and stability. Meanwhile, Greg's attempts to reinsert himself into Mary's life were met with careful resistance. His offer of collaboration was acknowledged, but Mary made it clear that their interactions would remain strictly professional. She was firm in her boundaries, ensuring that her focus remained on her daughter and her business. One afternoon, as Mary walked through the newly opened Netfarm facility, she received a call from Greg. He wanted to discuss a recent development related to their business interaction. "I have some new information that might interest you," Greg said on the phone. "It could be beneficial for Netfarm." Mary listened, her mind focused on the implications for her company. She maintained a polite yet professional demeanor, carefully evaluating the information. Her primary concern was always the well-being of her business and her daughter. Later, Mary shared the details with Michael, who offered his insights and support. Together, they navigated the complexities of the new information, ensuring that any decisions made would align with Mary's goals and values. As the months passed, Mary's life found a harmonious balance. Netfarm continued to flourish in Green City, Terry thrived in her new environment, and Mary's relationship with Michael deepened. Greg remained a part of the professional landscape, but his influence over Mary's personal life was minimized. Mary had faced many challenges and setbacks, but she had emerged stronger and more resilient. Her ability to blend her personal happiness with her professional success was a testament to her growth and determination. The shadows of the past no longer loomed large over her future. Instead, Mary embraced the light of new beginnings, surrounded by the love and support she had always deserved. And as she looked out at the vibrant city below, Mary knew that her journey was far from over. She had built a life of purpose, love, and strength, and she was ready to face whatever the future held with unwavering resolve. Greg's office was a sleek, modern space, but the once pristine environment now mirrored the chaos in his mind. The news of Netfarm's success and Mary's renewed happiness had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. His attempts to mend fences with Mary had been met with polite but firm rejections. The reality that she had moved on, both personally and professionally, was a bitter pill to swallow. Greg had always been a man accustomed to control and success. His ventures thrived, and his reputation was well established. But now, seeing Mary with Michael, a man who seemed to provide the emotional stability and support she deserved, Greg felt an unfamiliar pang of jealousy and regret. The meetings with Mary had revealed a painful truth: she was no longer interested in his attempts at reconciliation or collaboration. His previous actions had burned those bridges, leaving him with only a professional facade to maintain. The realization that Michael, with his kindness and genuine affection, had filled the void Greg had left, struck him deeply. He felt a profound sense of loss, not just professionally but emotionally. As the days wore on, Greg's sense of failure deepened. The business achievements that once defined his success seemed hollow compared to the personal fulfillment he saw Mary finding with Michael. His attempts to salvage their past relationship or to gain back her trust had only highlighted how out of touch he had become with the person she was now. Desperation began to take hold. Greg's normally sharp focus on business wavered as he grappled with the realization that he had lost something invaluable. The thought of Mary building a life with someone else, someone who was genuinely there for her, haunted him. He found himself questioning his choices, his motives, and the life he had built for himself. At home, Greg's mood was somber. His interactions with colleagues and friends grew increasingly strained as he withdrew into himself. The pressure of maintaining his public image while dealing with his inner turmoil became unbearable. His pride and desperation collided, making him a shadow of his former self. In a moment of vulnerability, Greg reached out to an old friend, a counselor who had helped him in the past. During their sessions, he began to confront the full extent of his actions and their consequences. His counselor encouraged him to reflect on his behavior and to understand the genuine reasons behind his attempts to reconnect with Mary. It was a painful journey, but one that was necessary for his emotional healing. Greg came to understand that his attempts to win Mary back were driven more by fear of loss than by genuine remorse. He had failed to acknowledge the damage he had done and the changes that had occurred in Mary's life. His realization was a turning point, leading him to confront his own issues and to seek a path toward personal redemption. Though he knew he could never undo the past, Greg began working on himself, focusing on his own growth and well-being. He sought to make amends where possible, not with the expectation of rekindling his relationship with Mary, but to find closure and to better himself. Meanwhile, Mary continued to thrive in her new life. Her relationship with Michael grew stronger, built on mutual respect and affection. The presence of Greg in her life had diminished to a distant, professional acquaintance. She remained focused on her daughter and her work, embracing the happiness and stability she had fought so hard to achieve. In a way, Greg's journey toward redemption mirrored the resilience Mary had shown throughout her life. He had been forced to confront the reality of his actions and the depth of his feelings, ultimately leading him to a place of personal growth. Though the past could not be rewritten, both Mary and Greg found a measure of peace in their own ways. As Greg looked at his life from a new perspective, he found solace in the understanding that some things were beyond repair, but personal transformation was always within reach. He accepted that Mary's path was no longer intertwined with his, and he began to rebuild his life, not out of desperation, but out of a genuine desire to be a better person. And so, Mary and Greg's stories, though diverging in their own ways, both reflected the themes of redemption, resilience, and the ongoing quest for personal fulfillment. Each found their way forward, shaped by the lessons of their past and the hope for a brighter future.